I was 23, Grandpa was 24. When we went to Europe?
Yes.
Okay, 1950. Pa went in 57, I went in 58. In a little town called Berglingen, which was was about 40 miles from Stuttgart, Germany. It was still a bombed out city. And what they were doing is taking all the ruins and piling them in one spot in Stuttgart, and they called it Rubble Hill. A Rubble Hill was so high that they actually had a road that started at street level, and you could drive around this hill. And when you got to the top, there was a big cross. The post that he stayed at was very unique because it was Rommel's, who was a German commander, tank commander. It was his headquarters during the Second World War. And that's what they call Panzerkaserne. Panzer means tanks. I lived in a home with a German family.
Oh, okay.
Because you had to have certain rank to live on the base. He enlisted in the Army Reserve in 1956, and he was drafted in 1957 and served 2 years active duty in Europe. Mainly was maneuvers, and they would be 3-week maneuvers on the Czech border with different countries under the NATO, which is North Atlantic Treaty Organization.
And you said he was on the Signal Corps?
In the Signal Corps. Mm-hmm. And that was all the he would lay all the communication for the maneuvers. We were always concerned with war with Russia. It was always there, but it was a Cold War, and that was the only.
Lebanon.
Oh, well, there was a Lebanon crisis. And while we were there was an incident with Lebanon where troops from Paz Kaserne left, and they were gone for 3 months. We had to go to a class at headquarters where they gave us IBM cards, and there were enough cards to get us through checkpoints if there was a war. We would have to take our car. We could take one other person, a small dog, had to have an extra fan. They would take us to, we'd have to hand an IBM card in at every checkpoint, which there were, if I remember right, there were 10 checkpoints, which would take us from Germany, from Berlin, Germany, in the Black Forest where we were, to Bremerhaven, which is a port in Germany. In Bremerhaven, they would drive our cars into the ocean, put us on a boat, and ship us over to England. And from England, we would fly home. That was what we were, that was...
what you were prepared to do
yes.
if there was a war?
There was an IBM system, was the first computer system. Mm-hmm. And they had cards. They were about that big. Mm-hmm. And they had all holes in them, I guess, you know.
And it had to match up in order for you to move on. Mm-hmm. That had like all of your information of who you were and...
Mm-hmm. Yeah. For Pa, they had what they called alerts. Now, you never knew whether the alert was real or if it was just a practice. And many times the alerts were called in the middle of the night. And what they would do is get all the soldiers on the base. And then we, as a dependent, we would be alerted. And they would let us know what time we would have to leave and prepare ourselves for a convoy to Bremerhaven. And I don't know where they would take the soldiers. That was secret. Where they would drive to. That was always secret. However, they had alerts, but none of them were ever a real threat. Right, the one that I was involved in, the alert was sounded at 1 o'clock in the morning. And Pa had to get his duffel bag, his emergency duffel bag. And I drove him up to the base, took him into the base, and we parted and didn't know when we were going to see each other again. Then I went home and waited. I guess it was about 6 o'clock in the morning, and Pa came home that the alert was canceled. It was just a practice. So I waited with a friend. We were going to take the car and go. It was frightening. It was very frightening when they would call, because you didn't know whether you were going to go home or what was going to happen, and you sat there for 7 hours not knowing what to do. They would have come with the speakers on the road. We lived on the main street.
Oh, okay.
And they knew who you were and where you were living, but they would have told us it was time to form a convoy to go, and we had to stay in that convoy. Well, he was with, of course, the U.S., and sometimes his maneuvers would be with the French or the Italians. The French, the Italians, and who else? English. And they would maneuver. Well, he was Signal Corps, and he laid all the communications for all of the people, all of the troops in the maneuver. Yeah, that's as close as they could go. At that time, that's as close as they could go to the communistic countries. Because at that time, with the Cold War, you didn't take your troops into any of those communistic countries. It would be war if you did. And once Pa, before we left, Pa made what they call specialist fifth class, which is equal to sergeant rank. So, actually, I don't want to tell him that he made sergeant and lost it in the same day.
Why did you lose it?
Speeding. Okay, am I done?
Yeah, you're done.